In 2016, there were two separate actions. The U.S. House and the Senate had moved to make it easier for military veterans to get access to medical marijuana. The efforts that were largely but not unanimously supported by Colorado's congressional delegation. The first step was a House vote Thursday on an amendment to a budget bill for the VA and military construction that would allow doctors with the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs to recommend pot as treatment to veterans in states where medical marijuana is legal, which is roughly half the country. The Senate took a similar approach in its own version of the spending measure by neutering a VA policy that had prohibited this practice. 5 of Colorado's 7 representatives in the House supported the amendment, including Jared Polis, who had co-authored the provision. Veterans whose doctors believe that medical marijuana will help them address medical issues such as PTSD, right, shell shock, post-traumatic stress disorder, or chronic pain should be afforded that option. Jared Polis is absolutely right. So 5 of the 7. Guess who did not sign up for allowing veterans to have access to medical marijuana? Scott Tipton, the 3rd Congressional District, the person that represents Pueblo. So our representative, the representative of conservative Pueblo, went, voted for Donald Trump, and then you had, what's her name? Joyce fucking Bales, right? And then Obama comes into town and David Galley gets fired. Yeah, right-wing conservative don't even have a shelter. So right-wing conservative Pueblo, who's had Scott Tipton as their representative for the last 8 years, nearly a decade now. So for 4 times in a row, the representative of Pueblo County and the Western Slope and 22 other counties stood up in Congress and said, no, we don't want any medical marijuana for our veterans. We don't give a shit if they got PTSD or not. It's against the federal law, so fuck you. That's Scott Tipton. That's what Scott Tipton did in 2016. There's been no evolution with him. He's still a fucking right-wing Republican piece of shit. 5 of Colorado's 7 lawmakers was in favor of it, including Jared Polis. Ask Polis about it. The measure was a part of an $82 billion bill funding military construction and veterans programs, right? So he's got all the fucking money for war. Just spent that war appropriations bill, $700 billion. So Scott Tipton is in favor of war and murder and killing, but he's not for universal health care because he's against life. So the measure would allow doctors with the Department of Veterans Affairs to talk with their patients about medical marijuana, make recommendations for treatment, which is something they were currently unable to do. A similar provision was approved in the Senate bill on military health spending. Representative Earl Blumenauer, Democrat from Oregon. The House measures an amendment to a Department of Veterans Affairs appropriations bill and passed by a 44-vote margin, making it the strongest sign yet that attitudes in Congress towards the drug are shifting along with public sentiment. Scott Tipton now doesn't talk about marijuana very much, even though Sessions rescinded the Cole memo, which is essentially a declaration of war against Colorado, Oregon, Maine, any of the other states that have legalized marijuana. And Scott Tipton puts out a little tiny statement, hey, I will stand up for the marijuana. No, you won't. Fuck you. Scott Tipton has never stood up for the marijuana industry. If he does, he's giving lip service, but he's just fronting. What does Scott Tipton ultimately believe? Well, let's just go look at what he did in 2016. This is when Colorado's marijuana legalization had already been successful for several years. So last 2 years ago, Scott Tipton goes in there and says, wait a second, veterans with PTSD? Nah, fuck them. Who gives a shit? Who cares about their lives? We don't care about this is Scott Tipton. He doesn't believe in universal health care. He doesn't believe in the lives of the people. And he definitely doesn't give a shit about health care for veterans with PTSD. And they don't have a right to smoke weed. They don't have a right to their own bodies. Scott Tipton is furthering prohibition. Prohibition didn't work the first time, and it's not working this time. Scott Tipton was wrong on that issue. And it wasn't just that issue. It wasn't just marijuana. He was even wrong when it come to hemp. Scott Tipton had a problem with hemp, fucking industrial hemp, which has no THC and you can produce all these products. Why would you have an issue with hemp? It just goes to show you how big of a zealot, how big of a right-wing war on drugs, Nixonian 1971 zealot, fascist zealot that Scott Tipton is. Not only does he not want PTSD, soldiers suffering with PTSD to get their hands on medical marijuana, and guess what, Scott Tipton? It doesn't matter if you make it legal or illegal, they'll still be able to get their hands on it. So I don't know what fucking world you live in. But Scott Tipton, what did he have against industrial hemp? There was a bill 2 years ago. The bill would remove industrial hemp from the marijuana definition in the Controlled Substance Act to allow farmers to grow it. So he's not for the farmers. He's not for families. He's not a friend of peace. Scott Tipton is a bad guy. Colorado Republican Senator Cory Gardner is one of the bill's co-sponsors. In a release, Gardner says hemp has the potential to be a major boon for the state's agricultural industry. Even Cory Gardner's in favor of hemp. But Scott Tipton here is Scott Tipton in his own words. He hasn't really decided on the issue. Ooh, God, that's a tough issue. That's a real hard issue. It could be a good thing for the state, Scott Tipton says. I think the industrial hemp has a completely different chemical composition than we have in marijuana. If this is an opportunity to be able to grow jobs, it's a low water use. It's low water use and to be able to use our agricultural community. I think that's a positive. Yeah, so he answers a very simple question like a fucking Republican, like a bullshitting fucking Republican. Hey, is hemp good for the state? Yes. Or no. I don't give a shit. Raise it and see what happens. Don't pollute your neighbor's yard. Raise it and then see what we can make out of it. But should you be allowed to? Of course you should be allowed to do it. Who the fuck would restrict you from doing that? Why would you? It's almost like saying don't raise tomatoes. Don't raise apples. You know, there's a cyanide compound in the seeds of apples. So that means apples are literally fucking poisonous. Do we ban apples? No. Nobody's ever overdosed on marijuana. So Scott Tipton's been on the wrong side of history the whole time. I'm supposed to believe that Scott Tipton is now going to stand up for our marijuana industry. Now he's going to stand up for the legalization of marijuana. He's been against it his entire fucking life. He was against hemp. He's against veterans from getting medical marijuana and Colorado farmers from raising hemp after we legalized it. Why would you have a problem with it now? What the fuck could you have a problem with hemp now? Because Jeff Sessions is a cunt? Well, the Cole memo, we're rescinding the Cole memo. This is the time when, if you truly love Colorado, and, you know, I would go to war over this. This is what the people wanted, and the federal government says, fuck what the people want. All authority rests in the people. These politicians get in there and they forget that. So the other issue I want to talk about is the Secure and Fair Enforcement Safe Banking Act of 2017. So Ed Perlmutter, Diana DeGette, Jared Polis, and the two senators, Michael Bennet and Cory Gardner, are in favor of the Secure and Fair Enforcement, the Safe Banking Act of 2017. But guess who's against it? Mike Kaufman is even in favor of it. So you got 9 delegates, right? In the Colorado delegation, if you count the two senators. So the two senators, Michael Bennet, Cory Gardner's for it, Ed Perlmutter, Diana DeGette, Jared Polis, Mike Kaufman. So, only two people next to you. There's 3 written here, so maybe I miscounted. But Ken Buck, Doug Lamborn, Scott Tipton. The legislation would create protections for banks, assuring that they won't be penalized for accepting deposits from marijuana businesses. So this is perfect for Republicans, right? Allowing banks to be able to accept money from the free market. What the fuck does Ken Buck, Doug Lamborn, and Scott Tipton have a problem with that? Why they got a problem with that? Why would you have a problem with that? What could be the problem? It's for their 1% buddies, their plutocrat friends. This is the shit Bitcoin is on the fucking rise. Because common sense shit, it's legal here. But does Scott Tipton give a shit? Does Ken Buck or Doug Lamborn give a shit that it's legal? No, they're still going to fight against hemp. They're going to fight against the Scott Tipton is at least. He's going to fight against hemp. He's going to fight against veterans with PTSD getting access to medical marijuana. And he's going to stop small banks from being able to collect on any of the profits or opening an account with any marijuana-related business. We'll talk about trying to hinder a goddamn fucking industry. It's been legal in Colorado for the past 5 years, and it's going successfully, and it's the solution to the war on drugs problem. I'm high right now, and I enjoy smoking weed. I don't hurt people. I don't do anything. I don't go outside and hurt people. I don't, if anything, I sit and I make videos, political videos. So the marijuana industry needs to be protected, Colorado. Fuck. You stuck your neck out. It's legalized now. We have a right to our own bodies. This is the future. Millennials, are you hearing? Are you listening? Net neutrality has been with us the entire time. We should fight for net neutrality. We should fight for marijuana industry in Colorado, and what they're fucking doing is bullshit. So when it comes to Scott R. Tipton, he's been in there for the past 8 years. He's not a friend of peace. He's pushing for nuclear war with Russia, Iran, and North Korea. He's not a friend of privacy or internet freedom, right? The net neutrality bill got fucking tore up. What about the Patriot Act and the NSA wiretapping surveillance that Edward Snowden sacrificed his entire career and life just to tell us about? Scott Tipton is wrong on all those issues. He's wrong on the environment. SG Interest actually owns Scott Tipton, so Scott Tipton only gives a shit about 4 people in this entire world who gives him campaign money. So SG Interest is an oil and gas company out of Houston, Texas, and they got 4 officers. So Scott Tipton gives a shit about those 4 people more than every person in the western slope of Colorado. He doesn't give a shit about you and me. That oil and gas, right, in that part of the earth, isn't that why it's part of the national forest? The Piceance Basin. So just to go back to marijuana to make my point as solidly as I can, on marijuana, I trust Diane Bush more than Scott Tipton when it comes to protecting the marijuana industry. Diane Bush, for the past 5 years, she's been writing the marijuana laws. She's been legislating them and regulating marijuana. She's been the state representative that has been writing the laws for the legalization of marijuana in Colorado. Diane Bush is legendary. Diane Bush is historic. Diane Bush was there in the very beginning. Will she protect marijuana? You're goddamn right she'll protect marijuana. Nobody's ever overdosed on marijuana, ever. It's mild. It's a wimp of a substance compared to alcohol, crack, or heroin. But we're going to call it a Schedule I substance. Pretend that it's heroin. Pretend that it has the worst, it's not as bad as heroin. But America has been lying about marijuana since 1973. Since Nixon's 1971. Fascist bullshit. So Scott Tipton, there's many reasons to be against him. But when it comes to the legalization of marijuana, he's too weak. He is too weak. He's fronting. He's a snake. He's fronting on marijuana. If he's going to go ahead, the reason why he said he was opposed to the military veterans with PTSD using medical marijuana, because the federal government says it's illegal. That's what Jeff Sessions is saying. So I'm supposed to believe that Tipton is now opposed to Jeff Sessions? Bullshit. As soon as Jeff Sessions tells Scott Tipton to suck his... It doesn't matter. So the point is, Scott Tipton is a bad guy. He's wrong when it comes to marijuana. He's wrong. And I don't believe him when he stand up to sessions. He's too weak. He's fronting on marijuana. He's been on the wrong side of history his entire life. Is he going to continue to protect the marijuana industry? I don't think so. I don't think so. I think if the tide of the country turned the opposite way, he would go right along with it. So he has no principles. He doesn't believe we, as Americans, have a right to our own body. He doesn't know history. The first prohibition didn't work. And so there's millions of reasons to be against Scott Tipton, Scott the Wretch Tipton, but his weakness on the marijuana industry and him, he's not going to protect you. I mean, fuck, Colorado, why would you put somebody in there, the farmers? He doesn't give a shit about you. He cares about SG interest. He cares about those 4 guys in Texas more than the entire people. Everybody in Montezuma County, everybody in Mesa County, all 22 counties, he don't give a shit about any of you all. The only thing Scott Tipton gives a shit about are his donors. The people that give him money to buy his votes to legally bribe him. So yeah, Scott R. Tipton sucks when it comes to protecting the marijuana industry.